Board of Estimate and Apportionment. Ms. Green, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Jones,
Present.
Comptroller Green,
Present.
President Reed.
Here.
Okay, quorum.
All present.
Great, quorum having been established. I'll make a few remarks before we open it up for public comment. This meeting is being held in accordance with the provisions of ordinance number 49318, approved March 2nd, 1959, which states in part, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment shall review the proposed budget with the heads of departments and other agencies and hold at least one public hearing thereon after giving at least 5 days notice in the City Journal. Required notice was published in the St. Louis City Journal on Tuesday, April 13th, and Tuesday and the 20th, in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on Monday, April 12th, 2021. So I want to say to everyone, thank you for taking time to participate in your city government. This budget does reflect one of my top priorities to close the workhouse, effectively zeroing out the budget for the facility as of the beginning of the new fiscal year, which starts July 1st, 2021. However, this budget does not necessarily reflect all of my stated priorities. However, I am hopeful that some will be addressed with the incoming $517 million we're receiving in the American Recovery Act from the federal government. I invite you to provide your input on how the city should spend the American Recovery Act funds on the mayor's website. We've already received over 300 comments on this issue. We'll be getting additional funds outside of the American Recovery Act to address rental and mortgage assistance, direct relief for those un or underemployed, are unhoused, and much more. And more information will be provided once we have a clearer picture of those funds and how we can use them. Our advisory group for the American Recovery Act will be announced later today. And if you wish to submit your thoughts and feedback regarding those funds, please send it in at the mayor's office website. If you go to the city's website and click on the mayor's website, you'll find the people's agenda and scroll down and there's a link to provide feedback there. The advisory group will be reviewing them for best possible course of action with this stimulus. And with that, and with no further ado, I'd like to call our first witness today. That's Michelle Woodhouse. Michelle, are you here?
Yes.
One brief reminder, everybody will have 3 minutes to speak, and our moderator will let you know when your 3 minutes is up. That's Stephanie Green. And you will be muted at the end of your 3 minutes. So Michelle, take it away.
Fantastic, thank you. So as many people here know, housing is a critical component of a stable life. It is the building block upon which all other supports exist. The original intent of the use tax was to fund affordable housing. Shortly after it was created, the Board of Aldermen voted to allow funds from the use tax to be spent on a variety of other things, including public safety. Now I understand we're getting these additional American Recovery Plan funds, but we really need to fund the affordable housing, and we need to make the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we really need to see these funds increased substantially until we solve our affordable housing crisis. If the use tax was not repurposed for general spending over the last 20 years, we could have actually made a dent in the city's affordable housing problem. Maybe we wouldn't have so many cost-burdened households, and maybe our homeless population would all be housed. Think about what nearly 20 years of a well-funded affordable housing initiative could have done for us today. When the eviction moratorium ends, our region will see a wave of evictions. It's up to the city of St. Louis to ensure that doesn't happen. Individuals and families who were financially impacted by the pandemic are going to feel this financial burden for several years to come. The support we can give them now to ensure they maintain stable housing will lay the foundation for their financial recovery. What we do now in this moment will determine whether our region's poverty rates grow or decline. We are at a critical point. You have the choice to continue minimally supporting affordable housing, or to take a stand and actually provide funding in the amount that our city needs. It is shameful that the use tax budget contains the status quo $5 million for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, yet the police are getting $19.8 million just from the use tax. This isn't just a financial decision. This is a decision that is life or death for homeless folks, survive or thrive for many families. And for our city, it is a choice that will determine whether we are a crime-ridden city where people have to fight to survive, or whether our low-income folks get to take a breath and begin to envision what their life can be when they no longer have to worry about financial struggle. You have the choice to double or triple funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or to keep the minimum $5 million so that we can be stuck in this same spot for another 20 years. Choose wisely. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next speaker is Alicia Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Jones and members of the board. My name is Alicia Hernandez. I'm a resident of the 10th Ward and also a steering committee member of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. Thank you for hearing community input today in regards to our city's 2022 fiscal budget. I'm here to ask you to remove funding from the vacant positions in the St. Louis Police Department, remove funding for police overtime, as well as SWAT, ShotSpotter, and the Real-Time Crime Center. Since about 2017, SLMPD has had 100 to 150 vacant positions each year, and these vacant positions account for a total of $10 million in salaries and benefits. This is money that could be put into human services and resources that address the root cause of crime, as mentioned, such as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, mental health services, human services, and additional resources and programs that ensure our families have what they need to live to their fullest potential. According to a report compiled by CAPCAR, based on data from a Sunshine Request, there were 1,785 SWAT deployments between 2012 to 2018. But of those, only 13 instances represented the original justifications for SWAT deployment, which totals to less than 1% of total employments. I would like to share that report with you all, and I'll be sure to email it to the Board of E&A as well as Clerk Green. Based on a 2014 ACLU report, nationally, SWAT has disparate racial impacts on Black communities. For fiscal year 2021, SLMPD requested just over $900,000 for the Real-Time Crime Center. I'm also a member of Privacy Watch, and we've been raising concern and awareness with other community members about the lack of transparency and accountability for the Real-Time Crime Center and police surveillance technology in our city. Surveillance in our communities is simply not about safety. It's about eroding the privacy rights of individuals who are already unjustly targeted and profiled by law enforcement. Black and brown communities and immigrants, regardless of immigration status, are among those harmed and targeted by surveillance. The state is watching us, but it's not watching everyone equally. We're currently in a movement nationwide and in St. Louis, which is pushing ourselves and our city leadership to re-envision public safety by reinvesting our money and resources into things that actually make our community safe. So once again, I ask you to remove funding from the vacant positions of the St. Louis Police Department, remove funding for police overtime, as well as removing funding for SWAT, ShotSpotter, and the Real-Time Crime Center. I ask you to reallocate funds and responsibilities from the St. Louis Police Departments to community-based systems of safety, prevention, and de-escalation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Our next speaker is Inez Bordeaux.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you, Mayor Jones and the rest of the board for holding this public meeting today. All of us on this call really appreciate it. I am showing up today to ask the mayor and Louis Reed and Comptroller Green to remove funding from the police overtime budget, to also defund the vacant positions and remove the funding also for, ShotSpotter, SWAT, and the Real-Time Crime Center. Alicia did a fantastic job going into all of the details, so I won't go over those again. But I do want to, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I feel like I've been saying the same thing for 3+ years. We do have a violent crime problem in St. Louis, but the solutions to those problems are not to continue to pour tens of millions of dollars into the police department. The solution to those problems are not to continue to surveil Black and brown communities. The solutions to those problems are money, resources, people who actually care about the people living in our most underserved and neglected neighborhoods. Because I'm also a nurse, this is an analogy I use a lot. If right now we're giving Tylenol to the city to treat an infection, where right now we're only dealing with the fever. A fever is a symptom of an infection. Crime is a symptom of the infection of poverty. And until we address poverty in the city, until we stop making poverty a policy choice that we are choosing every single day, until we begin to invest in people and communities in real substantive ways that make a difference in their lives, we are going to continue to have a crime problem. So let's take some money away from the police. The police getting $174 million, every single year. Meanwhile, the health department is getting $900,000. The Affordable Housing Commission is getting $5 million. We cannot continue to think that we can over-police and terrorize Black and brown communities, and that, those solutions are going to get us closer to where we need to be. People need access to safe, affordable housing. People need access to mental health services and drug treatment programs and diaper banks and food and housing security. All of these things are going to be the things that make our cities safer. And in the meantime, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, that kills more people per capita than any other police department in the country, is getting the majority of our budget. So I'm here today to ask, let's start by defunding the vacant positions. That would give us $10 million, and that would give us a huge jump on providing real public safety to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. Our next speaker is John Chasnoff.
Hi, I'm John Chasnoff, and I'm here speaking as a co-chair of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. Several speakers have already, very well articulated our belief in re-envisioning public safety and reprioritizing our budget. And so I wanted to specifically talk about one part of the police budget, which I think is emblematic of some of the problems we have in budgeting and in prioritizing. And that's the ShotSpotter program. That's the acoustic system that picks up gunshots and identifies locations. And I wanted to specifically reference a study that was released in January of 2020. It was in the Journal of Experimental Criminology, and one of its co-authors was actually, or is actually, the manager of Crime Analysis Unit for the SLMPD. So this is by no means some kind of, anti-external, anti-police study by any means. And what this study found, its conclusion was that results indicated that ShotSpotter does not significantly reduce violent crime levels in any of the study periods. And they say our results indicate no reduction in serious violent crimes, yet ShotSpotter does increase demands on police resources. And from an article that those same authors wrote in the Police Chief magazine, they said the current analysis of data from SLMPD shows the additional increase in ShotSpotter calls produces little actionable data. So what were some of the details of that study that led to that conclusion? They said that over the last decade, there have been 19,000 calls from ShotSpotter over this last decade. But those 19,000 calls led police officers to the scene of only 5 homicides, 58 aggravated assaults, and 2 robberies. And many of those had already been called in by citizens. So that same study was able to identify only 13 arrests out of 19,000 calls that were uniquely tied to the ShotSpotter calls. And what they showed was that human calls, when people call in with shots fired, those calls are 7 times more effective in identifying crime incidents than ShotSpotter. But the use of ShotSpotter reduced those human calls by about 25%. So we have been spending roughly $190,000 a year on ShotSpotter. It's not the biggest item in the police budget, but when the analyst inside the police department is showing it's ineffective, and yet even after this study, it was budgeted for another year, and it is again in this year's budget as far as we know. Why are we investing money in an ineffective program that actually reduces effectiveness? And besides the $190,000, we are also calling on police officers to answer all the calls that ShotSpotter sends out, and that results in 1,200 police hours a year that are wasted, which is a cost of another $90,000. So I think this program is emblematic of the need to dig into the police budget and change how we're prioritizing our expenses. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chasnoff. Our next speaker is, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this, Maisa Khan.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. It's Misa, like Misa's Nisa.
Maisa's Nisa.
There you go. Yep. Thank you and good morning, Mayor and members of the board. My name is Misa Khan, and I'm a proud resident of the city of St. Louis, Ward 24. In my professional life, I work on environmental and clean water policy, but I'm here commenting in a personal capacity as a city resident. I appreciate this opportunity to provide a public comment regarding the city's FY22 budget. I'm here today to support and amplify other voices and neighborhood leaders who are calling for the defunding of the SLMPD. Instead, I envision a future for St. Louis where our communities of color are free from everyday exposures to air pollution, drinking water contamination, and lack of access to outdoor spaces. I believe that centering the everyday health and well-being of our communities will contribute to safer neighborhoods. As the Environmental Racism in St. Louis report outlines, Black St. Louisans are exposed to greater environmental risks than white residents that directly contribute to health, economic, and quality of life disparities. Black children in the city of St. Louis are 2.4 times more likely than white children to test positive for lead in their blood. Most of the city's air pollution sources are located in our neighborhoods of color. Black residents of St. Louis are twice as likely to have limited access to healthy food, and household mold complaints are far more common in majority Black neighborhoods than anywhere else in the city. The city can do better to invest in the basic human needs of its residents: clean air, safe drinking water, and healthy soil to grow food. What's more, any one of these environmental issues has strong intersections to affordable housing and public transportation, to other underfunded areas in our city's budget. I believe St. Louis is ready and eager for transformation, especially considering that our Congresswoman Cori Bush is also committed to centering the needs of Black and Brown communities and tackling environmental racism. Congresswoman Bush introduced her Environmental Justice Mapping and Data Collection Act earlier this year. Why not take steps now at the city level to create the enabling conditions for environmental justice initiatives like those to be successful? Access to clean water, protection from air pollution, and access to outdoor spaces are all ways we can serve our shared vision of safe and sustainable neighborhoods and communities in St. Louis. I'm asking to defund the STMPD and fund efforts to ensure clean water, air, and healthy soil for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Misa. Next is Mr. Jerry Connolly.
Good morning, President Reed, Comptroller Green, and Mayor Jones. Thank you for the opportunity to testify publicly today. I want to focus my comments on transparency in government operations and also the use of incentives in the city. In terms of transparency, it's essential for accountability and public participation in the operation of the city government. We need to mandate all the following measures by ordinance. All government meetings should be recorded and posted online. The TIF Commission from a year ago was streamed and archived online. Since then, there have been 4 TIF Commission meetings. None of those meetings were live streamed. None of them are archived. Next week, there's a meeting at 10 a.m., a public hearing on the City Foundry. That meeting should be available for live stream and also archived. Currently, the city's website, which needs much improvement, does not give details on how the public can testify at that meeting. The Board of Aldermen should be able to review all mayoral appointees to government bodies, including the development boards and the local taxing districts. All those should go to committee and then have a final vote at the board. The audit of city government currently being performed by the State Auditor's Office has produced reports that I do not believe have been acted upon. And I recommend the Board of E&A, Board of Aldermen, and the Mayor's Office conduct hearings on the different audits that have been issued. There was an audit on taxing districts 18 months ago. I don't believe any follow-up changes have been made by the St. Louis Development Corporation in response to that. One of the findings of the audit was all 21 special business districts created in the city of St. Louis were not created in compliance with state statute. Those 21 districts, many of them engage private security firms who hire secondary duty St. Louis Metropolitan Police staff, officers, sergeants, and so forth. Collectively, those special business districts and some SIDs spend millions of dollars on private security, surveillance camera systems. The accountability on those boards is limited, to say the least. Many of the boards are comprised of individuals who do not live in the neighborhood served. Many of them do not live in the city. Developers who do projects in those neighborhoods serve on the boards. Some of them are even chaired by those developers. The conflicts of interest are rife and need to be reformed. In terms of tax incentives, in 2020, the St. Louis Public Schools lost out on $35 million in revenue that was diverted due to TIFs and tax abatements. $19 million of that was from tax abatements, $15 million was from TIFs. The reforms for incentives need to be mandated for all the government parties involved. That's SLDC's board, all the development boards, E&A, Board of Aldermen. Currently, the Board of Aldermen does not approve abatements for the Port Authority, for the they don't approve them for the Board Authority, despite SLDC's statement that they'll go to the board. There's nothing mandatory in terms of Port Authority approval. Incentives and tax abatements need to be capped to protect revenue, limit the length of the abatement and the portion of the improvements that are abated. For example, the luxury apartment tower on Kings Highway, if there had been a 50% cap on the value of that abatement, it would have generated $500,000 a year for the city over the 15+ year period of the abatement. Of that $500,000, because of the property tax formula, $300,000 a year would have gone to schools. Incentives need to be used strategically. I understand that Mayor Jones is committed to redirecting how incentives are used, and that's very important. Despite calls 5 years ago from the board to wean developers off incentives, incentives have continued to be concentrated in the Central Corridor and other stable neighborhoods, not in distressed neighborhoods in North City and portions of Southeast City that really need them. Conflicts of interest provisions need to be implemented. Rather than developers writing checks to older people and other elected officials during campaigns, they should be prohibited from doing so. I urge you all to lobby for changes at the state level.
Mr. Connolly, I hate to cut you off, but we're over your 3
Okay,
minutes.
thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is Christine Dragonette.
Yes, thank you. My name is Christine. I'm a city resident in the 13th Ward. I'm also a social worker and I work in the 19th Ward. And I'm speaking today in a personal capacity, but I'm drawing from my experience through my work. So a couple of notes, I'd like to urge the city not to reduce funds allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and in fact to reallocate the funding currently budgeted for vacant police department positions, police overtime, SWAT, Real-Time Crime Center, and ShotSpotter toward needed community resources, and especially affordable housing of all kinds. Others have spoken really well as to why these police budget items need to be eliminated, and I agree with those assessments for folks who have spoken on that before me. In terms of where we do need funding, I have plenty of ideas. In the program where I work, I hear all the time that people in St. Louis need more access to jobs with a living wage, healthcare, including mental health care, education, and more. However, a central basic right that I want to speak to in a particular way today is ensuring that everyone has access to safe and affordable housing. Affordable housing is one of the most central ways we can achieve true public safety, and we need to increase local funding for shelters and affordable housing of all kinds so that we can meet housing needs with no strings attached and in a way that's tailored to our community. As one example, if you've ever tried to find shelter or worked with someone to do this, you know the limits of our current shelter system. At my work, we host one of the emergency winter shelters that's open a couple nights a week when it's projected to be extra cold. The shelter and many of the shelters are largely volunteer run, and it's a huge effort to pull together the volunteers needed to make it possible. And our shelter is just one small part of a broader network of people and organizations who for years have largely scraped together their own resources to try to fill the gaps and ensure that people who need to go inside have a safe place to stay. The city should proactively fund both adequate emergency shelter and affordable permanent housing that is integrated throughout the city. There is a particular need for shelters that have the resources to adopt the low barrier safe haven model that's been touted by many of the local housing advocates who made it possible this past winter to have a 24-hour indoor space available when it was freezing outside. I know from my own experience that our shelter volunteers are not trained to support people whose mental health or behavioral health symptoms make it challenging for them to stay inside in a congregate setting. Because of the lack of resources and support, many of those folks are banned from local shelters and have very few, if any, options. But everyone deserves to have a safe place to stay, and we need to ensure that our city offers spaces with low barriers to coming inside and that have trained and compassionate staff. It's always a little shocking to me to look at the city budget and see the disproportionate amount of funding going to the police when we have so many pressing and underfunded community needs. So I urge the board to reallocate funds from the police budget toward housing and other basic resources that everyone needs and deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Our next speaker is Keith Rose.
Hello, my name is Keith Rose, and I'm on the steering committee for CAPCAR, the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. And as all of you know, for years, CAPCAR has called on the Board of E&A to reduce the funding of the SLMPD and to reinvest that money into real public safety, which we define as things like affordable housing and even a 24-hour walk-in shelter. For years, we have been asking you to move beyond the arrest and incarcerate model of policing. And around the country, people are realizing the error of the old lock 'em up mentality. We all know that undoing the damage caused by out-of-control police departments is the civil rights issue of our time. While E&A struggles to find the resources to meet all of the city's needs, the police department operates a secret slush fund of millions of dollars taken from citizens via civil asset forfeiture, which they have used for years to get around the oversight of the city's elected officials. According to a recent report from Auditor Galloway's office, the SLMPD had more than 1.9 million sitting in their civil asset forfeiture account at the end of the last fiscal year. They also received about $250,000 last fiscal year alone. With the addition of money from Prop P and other funding from things like the Police Foundation and Downtown STL, I want to remind you that the SLMPD has far more than enough money, even outside of the general fund, to do what it says it needs to do. And it is time to reallocate this money to meet our other needs. Additionally, I want to ask for the specific removal of funds from the SWAT team, which are often used to unconstitutionally attack protesters who criticize their own bad policing practices. St. Louis can't afford another Jason Stockley, and we can't afford another violent police response to protests. We are still facing millions of dollars in lawsuits stemming from Interim Chief O'Toole and his unconstitutional kettling tactic. I encourage you to take the money out of the SLMPD's budget and use it to settle those ongoing lawsuits, to stop racking up costs in the city councilor's office, and to allow our city to move forward. We have so many things that we could be spending this money on instead, and I think it is finally time for the city to take this opportunity to chart a new path, to go into the future, to be a city that people want to move to, that people want to stay in. I think St. Louis can use this coming money from the federal government, as well as our own general fund, to make St. Louis really hold the values that people these days want to see in their city government. And that's why I encourage you to reduce the funding of the SLMPD and spend that money other places instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Next up is Toby Matava.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'd like to thank you, Mayor Jones, and the board for this opportunity to speak. My name's Toby Matava, and I'm a proud resident of the 7th Ward. And first, I just have to say how much I appreciate, Mayor Jones, that you've come into office and taken action on day one. It is great to be here discussing the real issues affecting St. Louis rather than the use of a single building. I also want to second all of the points raised by many of the previous speakers and add my voice to urge the board to use this budget process to defund, re-envision, and transform public safety. I am a fairly new resident in St. Louis, having moved here after retiring as a university librarian. And while I have a lot to learn about the city, it's evident that what has been done in the name of public safety is simply not working. We have about 1,300 sworn officers in the city, and the police department budget occupies a sizable portion of the city budget. In addition, when looking more closely at the budget line items of other departments, you can see there are additional funds allocated to the police department. And while I understand that other departments have a need for security services from time to time, these additional funds further increase the percentage of the budget that the police department occupies. I urge the board to make this more transparent and rethink the level of funding that each department is allocating to police services. Are those funds really being used in the most effective and efficient manner? Has the level of funding that we've allocated to the police department so far made us a more safe and secure city? Statistics have shown that while the population of the city is decreasing, we continue to try to hire more police, and yet the crime rates continue to grow. This is a problematic correlation for those people who argue that we need to increase the size of our police force. I urge you to use this city budget to address the root causes of crime. One example where change can be made is in that $10 million currently allocated for vacant positions. Adding another 150 officers to the force will not address the root causes of crime. Rather than continuing to do what has not worked in the past, let's spend our money to provide the services and resources needed directly to the communities and programs that will improve quality of life throughout our city. I live downtown, and as I leave my building every morning, I see our unhoused population huddling over sewer grates to stay warm, digging through trash cans for food, and in desperate need of services that the city should be supplying. By reallocating that $10 million, we can make a tremendous difference in the lives of our unhoused population. Or perhaps we can use those reallocated funds to begin addressing the mental health needs of our citizens. Before COVID, I spent a lot of time court watching in the 22nd Circuit. And so very many of the cases that I witnessed involved mental health issues that can never be resolved by arresting people. So how about using those funds to organize mental health teams that can respond to calls rather than sending in the police? When basic needs of our citizens are being met, we invest our resources in the community and everyone will be safer. So I urge the board to transform this budget to fund the programs, resources, and services that will truly bring public safety to St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Next up, Taylor Paquette.
Hi, good morning. My name is Taylor Paquette, and I live in the 17th Ward. I'm here to advocate for a significant increase to the Health and Human Services budget. Especially after the past year, the value and the need for our health department is clear. We need to adequately fund and expand our health department to continue to address our current, future, and intersectional public health needs. Our Human Services Department serves our unhoused, our veterans, our disabled community members, our seniors, our youth and families, our most vulnerable neighbors, and we give them less than 1% of our resources and support. Comparatively, our public safety budget is at a proposed 53%. Health and public safety are linked. A significant amount of those impacted by the justice system have a substance abuse problem, are in serious psychological distress, or have a history of mental illness. If our vulnerable neighbors aren't safe and cared for, we aren't really addressing public safety, we are simply policing. The Cops and Clinicians program, aimed at dealing with mental health related calls to 911, is being funded through the health department, not through the public safety budget. This is an example of how we are leaning on health programs to innovate and better address public safety in the community, but we aren't funding it anywhere near the public safety budget level. Here is a comparison put together by Artsy Defenders. In 2017, when we were only spending 0.3% on HHS, for every $100 the city spent, $41 went to public safety and 31 cents went to our seniors, our veterans, our disabled community members, our youth and families, and our unhoused neighbors. These figures were, our proposed budget is only 0.4% more than it was in 2017, and this investment is still unacceptable. Health and human services should be humane. 0.7% is inhumane, and I urge a significant increase to this budget. And given the close link, it should come from the public safety budget, starting with the referenced vacancies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taylor. Next up is Gary Newcomer.
Hi, Mayor Jones, President Reed, and Comptroller Green. Thank you so much for having us today and also for providing this forum. I also wanted to thank Ms. Green and Mr. Payne too, and all the staff who work really hard behind the scenes to make the budget happen and everything else move. I think they just do a great job. I'm here today to share some concerns about the reduction in funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the proposed budget for the upcoming year. My name is Gary Newcomer, and I serve as the Director of Operations for the Community Builders Network of Metro St. Louis. I'm also a lifelong St. Louis City resident. For those of you who are not familiar, CBN is a coalition of about 80 community building organizations in the St. Louis region, including community-based nonprofits, lenders, private developers, philanthropic organizations, and government actors. But at the core of what we do is to support the folks in neighborhoods who are doing the work. We exist to support and build bridges across the St. Louis community. So it's our understanding that the proposed budget plans to cut funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund by approximately $1.5 million to $5 million, which is the legally mandated minimum. We've already heard from a lot of our nonprofit member organizations at CBN across the city, both in North City and South City and in the Central Corridor, who are really opposed and concerned about these cuts. So as such, we're strongly urging you as the Board of E&A to maintain the level of use tax funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at least $6.5 million. because we know that safe and affordable housing is public safety. We know that it is healthcare. We see that these cuts are disproportionate, while the use tax, which funds the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, is projected to increase during a pandemic by about 23%. There are currently cuts being proposed to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We know that housing needs have been skyrocketing, and we also know that it's going to be really important for our continued COVID-19 recovery. So the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a voter-approved tool that really works well in the city, thanks to its flexibility through use tax funds, because of its staff, because of the Affordable Housing Commission, and also, most importantly, because of the nonprofits who design really innovative programs to make it work and make those dollars have meaning. And because of that, for every $1 we invest, we get $18.77 back. So just to wrap things up again, CBN strongly urges you to maintain the current level of use tax funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at least $6.5 million, just to maintain our current programs. And then after that short-term need, let's talk about further increases in funding or new programs or other ways to lift up the trust fund over the long term with federal resources. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. Next up, Zoe Kraus.
Thank you, Mayor Jones and the board for having us today. My name is Zoe. I am a resident of the 6th Ward of the city, and I'm here today to also add my voice to the collective request to defund, reinvest, and re-envision the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department budget. And I'm asking that the board moves to defund the vacant position, police overtime, shot spotter, and SWAT, as well as the real-time crime center, for a really incredibly simple reason. And the reason is that I'm asking for the city to stop funding failed policies and instead reinvest and re-envision how we can build a safer St. Louis. So spending $172.3 million on policing is not making us safer. And in fact, as the city with the highest rate of killings by police per capita, it's actually making us measurably less safe. And I think if anything has been illuminated by this pandemic and the COVID-19 public health crisis, it is that we are only as safe, as healthy, as well as our neighbors are. And so the kinds of things that we need in this city, and I think a lot of great ideas have been put forth today, including the Affordable Housing Trust, are not going to be accomplished by continuing to fund the police department at a much higher rate than any of our health and human services. So I'm just asking that we take a moment and evaluate our budget and the things that truly keep us safe and keep our communities safe, and reinvest and re-envision the money that is currently going to failed policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Next up is James Pfister.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mayor Jones, President Reed, Comptroller Green. Thank you for having us here and allowing us to speak. Also, this is my first one of these on Zoom, and it's wonderful to see so many thoughtful and committed St. Louisans out here making their voices heard. My name is James Pfister. I'm also a lifelong St. Louisan, and I'm here to ask that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund be funded to the fullest extent next year. I gotta say, my ability to be here is a privilege. I have stable housing. I have stable work that allows me to take time out of my day to be here and speak up for some of those who can't. Housing is a human right. We all deserve access to affordable, quality housing. Housing is healthcare. Those who face housing instability or experience homelessness unfairly suffer increased health issues and medical expenses. Oftentimes those expenses are covered with public dollars. And most importantly to me as a former teacher, housing is education. Stable housing allows more students to go to school, to stay in that same school for year on year. They help students build social connections and focus more on their academics. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund does integral work in helping St. Louisans stay stable and find the housing that they deserve. The current plan for funding is unacceptable. Any cuts to affordable housing disproportionately affect low-income and minority St. Louisans. I ask for those who are not here to speak that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund be funded at $6.5 million or higher in the fiscal year 2022. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next up is Anna Gennari.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Mayor Jones and members of the board. My name is Anna Gennari, and I'm a St. Louis City resident and living in the 9th Ward. I'm also a member of St. Louis Mutual Aid, a network of thousands of neighbors across St. Louis that formed in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, taking care of each other in the gap at this time. As well, I'm the deputy director of a national child welfare and foster youth organizing network with my own lived experience with state violence here in St. Louis in the juvenile justice system as a young person removed from my home and taken into congregate care. As a concerned member of the community and through my personal lived experience and my work organizing alongside young people impacted by the foster care system, I deeply understand and have witnessed the grave cost of investing in anti-Black policing and state-sponsored violence on children, youth, and families. It is critical that we divest from policing and criminalized foster care systems and invest in our families and communities. According to data collected through the Fostering Core Improvement Initiative in the city of St. Louis, 18% of children are severed from their families because of inadequate housing, 25% because of an inability to cope in that moment, and 33% due to substance use. So it becomes the obvious solution that we will want to invest in housing, parental support, and healthcare that not only keep families together and increase overall well-being, but decrease the cost and ineffective and overburdened child welfare system. So I am definitely standing with folks asking to divest from and defund the vacant positions in SLMPD, SWAT, and the Real-Time Crime Center, and police overtime, and to use this over $20 million to invest in housing, healthcare, and reparations directly to impacted communities. In addition, as already stated, there's no correlated evidence that increasing police has decreased crime. In my work, along with educators, healthcare workers, and other public services, when I don't produce the outcomes that I've expressed to achieve, my funding is taken away. I don't get the grant, and best worst case scenario, I might be fired for someone else who can or an initiative that can do it better. I think now is the time that we take this critical funding away from the police and invest in real and actual solutions that protect and care for our families and communities. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Anna. Next up is Linda Nyan.
I'm muting myself. Good morning, Mayor Jones, President Reed, and Comptroller Green. My name is Linda Nguyen, and I'm the coordinator of Neighborhood Initiative Engagement here at Park Central Development. We're a nonprofit CDC located in the Central Corridor, serving over 12 neighborhoods north and south of Delmar Boulevard. I am here today to make a statement in support of fully funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at its bare minimum of $6.5 million in the city budget. Park Central is a proud recipient of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the last 3 years. The funding is at the core of our displacement work. It is how we are able to support the hardworking and dedicated families in the Central Corridor. Over the last 3 years, we have been able to provide resource counseling to address hundreds of low-income families with resources that help them stay in their home. Many of our residents live paycheck to paycheck or on fixed incomes like our seniors, and our resource counseling program really helps help them access hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of funding that otherwise would not have been applied for. With the leverage of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we are able to receive, Park Central does have the staffing capacity to apply and attract over $100,000 worth of other additional services and internal funding that we're able to provide to our residents. Examples are food access, rental and mortgage assistance, emergency utility assistance, and even free lawn mowing service and snow removing services for our aging senior population. In 2020 alone, Park Central served over 500 households during the height of the COVID pandemic with the support and funding that we received from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So again, I strongly urge you to maintain the level of funding that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at its bare minimum of $6.5 million in the city budget, given how critical these funds are for providing resources to our hardworking families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Linda. I don't see Lucretia Sutherland. Does anyone know her or know that she's on the line? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next person. Anna Louise Schmidt.
Hi, I'm coming to you as a mom. We live here on the edge of the city out here, the Ellendale Maplewood area. And I say that because we have a lot of open space and big yards around us and parks. And yet my children, I am an adoptive mom of Black children. And we have tried to educate, but not terrify our children in the best we know how about policing. Yet I have a 14-year-old son who even will say, Mom, will you come out in the backyard with me while I play because I'm scared of the police? Our family has also been involved in the Close the Workhouse campaign. And my daughter came to all the meetings. Our whole family came to all the meetings and heard a lot of people speak. This last fall during election season, she was asked to write about something that she thought was important to do politically and how she would help that occur. She wrote about closing the workhouse, and she said to help that occur, we would really need to have more housing for people because that helps people not need to be incarcerated. So my 12-year-old is really understanding why we need to defund the police. And I want to say our family really encourages this beginning defunding of decreasing the jobs that are not filled and just not filling them. That's a great way to start. And we want to see, we have a lot of mental illness in our family. And as we have worked with different and volunteered different places in the city, then we've seen people with mental illness lose self-control. And we just strongly feel that that is not addressed by weapons. We would love to see funding go to places that assist people with mental illness to where they can really be protected as it's a true illness and not recognized as a true illness, just like addiction is so often not recognized as a true illness. Money can go there and really benefit our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Louise. Next up is Jim Roos. Jim, you're on mute.
Mr. Roos, can you unmute yourself? Mr. Roos, we can't hear you. You have to unmute.
It should be the microphone at the bottom right of your screen. And if you're on an iPad, you need to, okay, I see you got some technical support coming.
Or you can push the little red dot, the three little dots at the top.
Right.
We could move on to Jay and I can try and help Mr. Roos.
let's see, one other thing works.
Is it too late?
Oh, we got it. All right.
You didn't hear me cussing because I have trouble with my computer. I want to say hello to Lewis and Darlene, with whom I've worked on occasion in the past, and welcome to you, Tashara. From 1971 until 2018, I worked with two organizations. One was called Neighborhood Enterprises. The other was Sanctuary in the Ordinary. One managed lower cost rental housing and the other one owned it. In 1999, I helped, I've forgotten her name now, the woman from Affordable Housing for Missourians who formed the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I certainly recommend that we don't cut funds to the trust fund. However, I also recommend that the trust fund be directed to be, it has the ability, but it hasn't had the practice of providing funding for what we call selective rehab. I believe that repairing and retaining housing must be a part of our strategy, not just gut rehab or new construction. To date, the trust fund has not done that. I've submitted 3 documents to the Board of ENA. 2 of them talk about the general strategy that I'm trying to describe, and one talks about using some of the funds from the stimulus for that. It's more complicated than I really can get into in the 3 minutes here. I'm just asking that you look at those 3 documents in our website. I may want to reference one other thing. In 2000, from 2000 to 2005, our organization lost 24 buildings, 60 apartment homes to eminent domain taking. When the city was going to authorize eminent domain on still another building, we put up a mural. I know that, and maybe all of you are aware of that. I know Lewis and Darlene are. The mural said, "End eminent domain abuse." Is that the end? For 1 minute? Okay. The thing that we had an organization defend us and we kept the mural, but afterwards Lewis Reed said to me, "Jim, you changed public sentiment on this. The idea that you're supposed to remove, that you can remove bogus blight by using eminent domain." So I'm hoping that my testimony and my longevity will be recognized for it's not for itself, but for the benefit that it presents to the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Next up is Jay Shepherd.
Good morning. My name is Jay. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a proud resident of the 25th Ward. I'm also an organizer with Action St. Louis. I want to thank you all for allowing public comment today. I also want to start by thanking Mayor Tashara Jones for out the gate on her first day defunding the workhouse. I think that this shows that this administration really cares about and knows that the current arrest and incarcerate model of public safety is failing us and is harmful and violent to our communities. And that this was a momentous step in this larger process of re-envisioning public safety towards a St. Louis where we all feel safe because we have the resources to thrive and have addressed the root causes of crime. The next steps this administration, I believe, needs to take is diverting funds from our city's overinflated police budget and reinvesting them into housing, healthcare, education, and job creation. I'm asking that the Board of ENA defund the 100 to 150 vacant positions that, like Alicia said, have been vacant for over 3 years. Defund SWAT, defund Shot Spotter, defund the Real-Time Crime Center, defund police overtime. We know that the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department kills more people per capita than any other police department in this country. Killings by police are at a 16.9 average annual rate per million. Our community members, Kiwi Herring, Von Derek Myers, and many more who have been murdered by SLMPD should still be here today. I am urging that you all divest funding from a system that has drastically stifled the lifespan of Black and Brown St. Louisans and invest into our well-being. Defunding the 100 to 150 vacant positions, SWAT, ShotSpotter, Real-Time Crime Center, and police overtime would give our city a little over $20 million to support families right now during the biggest eviction crisis. That's over $20 million we could use towards re-envisioning public safety by funding non-carceral first responder alternatives that don't treat mental health crises with guns and lethal force, but instead focus on building entirely new community infrastructures that produce real, genuine safety and sustainability for our communities. I want to thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Jay. Next up is Amelia Hinckley.
Hi, my name is Amelia. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in the 15th ward. I'm so excited to be speaking today as we kick off a new budget and Mayor Jones's administration, because it feels like we actually have the chance to do right by the residents of the city. Because as of now, we are failing our people, we are failing our neighbors. And so it baffles me year after year to watch us invest hundreds of millions of dollars into our police department when things aren't getting better, when crime isn't going down, when violence isn't going down. And yet we keep doing the same things over and over and over again. And as one of the women earlier stated, even a 12-year-old can see that when you invest money in something and you don't get the solutions that you want, you should probably stop investing money in that thing. And so I was sickened and horrified to see that over half our budget right now is going to police when they have showed us what inept and brutal failures they are. As other people have pointed out, in almost every other industry, when you routinely fail at your job, you typically don't get to keep that job. And as Jay pointed out, they not only fail to prevent or solve crimes, but they are also one of the deadliest police departments in the country. If we keep putting money into their hands, they will continue to use it to murder our residents with impunity. I personally do not want my tax dollars going towards the killing of the next George Floyd, Adam Toledo, Breonna Taylor, or Ma'Khia Bryant. Our police department does not deserve another cent of money, and I strongly support defunding all of it, but we can at least start with some of the things that people have talked about already, which is defunding vacant positions, ShotSpotter, and the SWAT team. And instead, we could actually invest in things that we know will save lives, that we know will help our people, which today I would specifically like to talk about our Health and Human Services Department, because as we all know, we are living through a global health pandemic, and yet the Health and Human Services makes up less than 1% of our budget. So I don't really know how you could go through the year that we just went through and not understand why funding public health initiatives is so crucially important. For example, right now, less than 20% of our residents are fully vaccinated, despite the fact that now we have a much increased supply of vaccines. We have less than a fifth of our residents being vaccinated. It's because people need help. They need information. We need people on the ground, knocking on doors, making calls, giving people rides to their appointments, really investing in the on-the-ground support to make sure that all of our residents get the support that they need to survive this pandemic that we have already lost so many people to. And outside of the current pandemic, we have so many consistent public health issues. We have an STD crisis, we have an asthma crisis, we have an opioid crisis. Investing in education, treatment, and support for these public health issues will actually save lives, which the police do not do. So if we say that we want to put our people first, if we say that we want to help our residents, then we should invest in systems that actually do that. It really baffles me that we continue to do the same thing and expect different results. And across the country, we are seeing this movement, and we need to be a part of that because these police officers are not keeping us safe. It's not keeping me safe. It's not keeping my neighbors safe. It's not keeping my community safe. And I don't want another cent of my tax dollars going to fund any more deaths, any more killings in our city. So as many people today have asked, I would also like to echo the call to reallocate funding away from the St. Louis Metro Police Department and into real solutions like housing, like health, like infrastructure, because it's the only way forward. So please, please do the right thing for all of us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amelia. Next up is Stephanie Coe.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Jones, and thank you to the Board of E&A. I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stephanie Coe. I live in the 15th Ward, and I wanted to start off my comments about the budget by sharing a personal experience of mine. A few years ago, I was a crime victim myself. I was robbed at gunpoint, and I was with a friend of mine at the time. It was obviously very traumatizing for us. And unfortunately, what was also traumatizing was our experience with the police department afterwards. The next day, we ended up reporting the incident, and it took about 12 hours for us to even file the report in the first place because of bureaucracy. And when we finally shared our story, instead of being supported by the detective ended up interrogating my friend, who is Black, implying that he had set me up for the robbery. So this was our experience with the police department. And as I look at the proposed budget for the policing this year, to me, it looked like there was at least $235 million towards policing, just because of all the various places outside of public safety that it was showing up as well. And yet I don't think that $235 million would have kept us safe that night. And I certainly don't think it would have kept the community safe either, because I don't believe that detective ever even filed the police report or followed up on an investigation. And so I would like to reflect on what would have kept us safe that night if we had invested in other types of things. First of all, what if we had invested in, and what would it looked like if I was able to report that incident with a trauma-informed civilian interviewer, not a police officer who re-traumatized us? And what would it have looked like if they were able to connect us with mental health supports as well? What would it look like if we were able to invest in streets, lighting, and economic development? Where we were robbed was in a dimly lit corner of the city, across from a vacant building, at a gas station. And there are too many corners like this in the city. And so if we had allocated more funding for that. I also want to point out, in the proposed capital improvement funds, the police department improvements have twice as much money allocated there than building demolitions for the entire city. And we know that vacant buildings is obviously another factor of crime. What if we invested more in workforce development and youth programming? The people who robbed us were unfortunately teenagers, and we continue to underinvest in young people. Looking at the budget, it looked like Slate had about $6 million for this year, which is a 40% reduction from a previous year. And in addition to that, $0 from the general funds. We also have only $1.5 million from the general fund going to Human Services Department. And as many people have spoken to, we not only have lack of adequate funding for family and youth services, but we also rely on volunteers to provide basic services for the unhoused. What if we also invested more in quality affordable housing, as so many others have spoken up to today, where again, $0 from general fund and only $5 million for affordable housing. These are just a few examples of what the atrocious disparities between what is invested in policing and what we could instead be investing in other services that would really actually keep the community safe. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next up is Kim Janey.
Hi, thank you all for being here and allowing me to speak. I'm a lifelong city resident, living in the Forest Park Southeast 17th Ward for 30 years. I also volunteer at the Wellston Loop Community Development Corporation on Hodemont and Dr. Martin Luther King in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood. I want to talk about our city neighborhoods that have been deliberately underdeveloped and are in desperate need of a holistic, trauma-informed community development strategy that involves funding for pre-development efforts, including a drastic increase in home repair funds, not money to study this glaring need. I know the Healthy Homes is many years wait list. We also need stipends to pay residents as caretakers in their own neighborhoods, not high profile team sweeps. In Forest Park Southeast and other neighborhoods, Washington University and other large institutions benefit from city residents and often play a disastrous role when they come into neighborhoods. Hundreds of properties in Forest Park Southeast were acquired by WashU and left vacant for decades. This had a rippling effect on residents, causing insurance rates to rise, property values to fall, and created dangerous conditions. After receiving millions of public funds, WashU through Park Central and WashU Redevelopment Corporation used private policing efforts to further de-densify and criminalize the residents. The demographics have flipped and the gentrification is nearly complete, leaving a handful of long-term homeowners stuck in limbo. Thousands of rental units tower over what had been a mixed racial working class neighborhood, and our infrastructure is not prepared. the abuse of tax incentives, lack of modest home ownership opportunities, which prevent Black and lower income families from building wealth, and the excessive amounts of rental unit prevents the establishment of long-term stable communities. The political use of LRA properties where aldermen hold buildings and land for developer friends, the lack of maintenance on these buildings further destabilize neighborhoods. The abuse of city police powers in regard to code violations and nuisance property citations should not be included in development strategies any longer. These are punitive measures meant to further oppress our residents. I want to bring attention to strategies that were used in the 17th Ward and hopefully prevent their use in North City, where neighborhoods have been underdeveloped, neglected, and abused. A glance at the beautiful historic Wellston Loop Station in the 6100 block of Martin Luther King is a symbol of city neglect and could be renovated at a fraction of the cost it took to construct the Delmar Loop trolley, which is a disaster and a despicable use of public funds. I think it was mostly federal, but whatever. We have a J.C. Penney building on Martin Luther King, deserves support also. City residents, we need to stop putting money towards punishing city residents. City residents want parity, not charity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kim. Next is Julia Cushing.
Good morning. My name is Julia Cushing. I'm a resident of the 28th Ward and a community mental health provider in St. Louis City. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to speak today. I am here to express my support of a new vision for public safety. We know that violence is a huge concern in our city. I hear stories of violence and trauma very often, as my job is to provide free therapy services to young children and their families in the city. I work with children who've often been the victim of or have witnessed pretty extreme violence. My clients are often the kids in school who are labeled as bad, labeled as violent or aggressive, kids getting into fights. And sadly, without early intervention and support for children who've experienced trauma, there can be devastating consequences such as violent outbursts and then potential time spent incarcerated, which often compounds trauma. So as a therapist, I'm often advocating for people to see my clients as kids who are hurt and kids who are scared, rather than kids who are violent and aggressive. We don't go into fight or flight mode unless we feel we are in danger. So what we try to do in therapy is provide children with signals of safety, create healthy relationships where they feel like there are trustworthy people who are here to protect them. And when we do that, these violent behaviors start to subside. But that's because we go in and address the root cause of the behavior instead of simply punishing the behavior. When I talk to parents and teachers about how we can make their kids feel safer, I don't talk about putting more police in their schools. I don't talk about putting more cops on their streets. But one of the main things that I do talk to them about is creating stability, routine, and predictability. So if I don't know where I'm going to sleep tomorrow, if I don't know where my next meal is coming, I cannot feel safe. So for this very reason, I would like to advocate that we not only increase funding for mental health services, but that even before that, we need to increase funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Having a stable place to live is one of the best ways to create felt safety for children and adults alike. And having a community who feels safe will have ripple effects for every single person in our community. Trying to get a job without stable housing is incredibly difficult. Attending weekly therapy appointments is incredibly difficult without a stable place to live. Succeeding in school is incredibly difficult without stable housing. Working towards sobriety is incredibly difficult if you don't have a stable place to live. And if we know that the root causes of crime are trauma, addiction, and poverty, police do not address those things, but more affordable housing can. So I support taking money from our policing budget and reinvesting that money into affordable housing to create some real safety in our community. Thank you again to the board for the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Julia. Next up is Tracy Fantini Spies.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Fantini Spees. Don't worry, everybody does that. I am an 11th Ward resident. I'm a lifelong St. Louisan. I've lived in the city for 15 years. I've been a social worker in the city almost that long. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing Options provided for the elderly and a member of the Anti-Racism Organizing Collective. I'd just like to say congratulations to Mayor Jones and to thank you deeply for those of us who have worked on the Close the Workhouse campaign for years, making good on that promise as you made to defund the workhouse on day one. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak before President Reed and Comptroller Green today as well. Many of my fellow residents speaking today have recognized that the arrest and incarcerate model of public safety has not only failed, but it's killing our neighbors and destroying our families and our communities. It is far past time to end this. I am asking you today to defund these vacant SLMPD positions, the Shot Spotter, SWAT, Real-Time Crime Center, and police overtime. These funds have to be reinvested into our community to address the actual root causes of crime. Being a housing social worker for many years, the thing I learned on day one as an intern is that there is no aspect of quality of life and well-being that is not related to housing. Healthcare, access to employment, transportation, mental health care, all of these things are completely and totally destabilized if someone doesn't have a safe and affordable place to live. So the first place I would ask that you reinvest these funds is in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as mental health care, job training, living wages, remediating the environmental dangers that disproportionately affect our Black and Brown neighbors. We also need to reinvest this money in alternatives to police response to problems that they aren't really equipped to respond to anyway. We need to invest in non-armed first responders like social workers who can independently respond to calls for help with issues like mental health, folks who are unhoused and need access to safe and affordable housing, folks who are suffering from substance abuse. All of these problems can be addressed without unarmed police showing up at the scene and threatening folks' lives and livelihoods. We can also invest in sobering centers, intentional encampments for the unhoused, rental assistance, financial relief to those who have been directly affected by police violence and brutality, as well as gentrification and disinvestment in our communities, as one of the previous speakers just noted. I know, I'll just say finally that I know it's a complicated relationship between city government and our public schools, but we also have to address the fact that our public schools are under fire right now from those who would seek to privatize them and destroy SLPS as we know it. And we have to work together also with the city and pour more funding into educating our children. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Spees. Next up is Kennard Williams.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me here this morning. Kennard Williams, St. Louis City resident in the 28th Ward and housing justice organizer. Year after year, the city of St. Louis creates a budget that spreads resources into different departments. However, one seat at the table has consistently claimed the lion's share of these resources, public safety. Almost in a formulaic manner, the public safety department routinely absorbs easily half of the operating budget. This disproportionate allocation of funds has come at a very real human cost that compounds annually in the form of neglecting the city's unhoused and low-income populations that have been struggling to remain afloat over the last year. The COVID-19 pandemic has not only claimed lives, but the pursuant economic devastation has triggered a rapidly intensifying housing crisis that now places thousands in the region at risk of immediate eviction. Additionally, a legacy of antagonistic policies and utilizing the police to target the unhoused communities on the part of the previous administration have left many displaced and more vulnerable to COVID-19 and other factors that shorten one's life on the street. To be clear, this is a crisis moment. The city of St. Louis must invest in our unhoused and low-income populations by way of allocating more funds into human services, crisis counselors, shelters, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to increase habitable housing stock, and rental assistance. Currently, the St. Louis Police Department sits on over 100 vacant positions with a cost of $10 million. We must defund these positions and invest this money into actual public safety by way of investing in our community to protect citizens. The influx of funds in policing have consistently failed at resulting in a safe city, and the encroaching housing crisis continues to put us further at risk. In its current state, the city's infrastructure to support, house, and shelter individuals experiencing homelessness is inefficient and is beyond its breaking point. We know that this number will continue to increase as more families are displaced and evicted from their homes, yet the budget in its current form does not reflect that. In lieu of placing resources where they've needed to go, we've continued to see them go into failed surveillance programs, incarceration in facilities where people wait months on end with no trial or access to legal counsel, and even protest suppression to brutalize our citizens on the street while unhoused families are given warming buses to wait outside city shelters they usually cannot get access to, and families needing rental assistance creep closer and closer to the end of the city's eviction moratorium with no word on if they will be approved for rental assistance funds. The Board of E&A has a chance in this moment to do the right thing and mitigate the very real and irreparable damage that will be caused to people if these funds are not positioned wisely. It is imperative that we cut our bloated police budget, defund the vacant positions at SLMPD, and immediately fund things that directly affect the lives of so many people that are left hanging in the balance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kennard. Next up is Jamie Maffa.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Good morning to the Mayor, President Reed, and Comptroller Green. My name is Jamie. I am a resident of the 17th Ward here in St. Louis, and I am testifying today in favor of decreasing the police budget for 2022, in particular, by eliminating funding for the vacant positions on the police force and by defunding the Real-Time Crime Center and the ShotSpotter program. When thinking about what safety means to the city of St. Louis, the roots of what truly make a community safe go well beyond crime. True community safety starts with the community programs that help everyone meet their basic needs and thrive, programs that guarantee necessities such as safe housing and access to food. A year ago, I co-founded St. Louis Quarantine Support, an organization that has since brought tens of thousands of dollars worth of food to thousands of people across St. Louis City. Though our organization began as a crisis response to COVID-19, we quickly realized how pervasive food insecurity is in St. Louis. Furthermore, we saw the dearth of effective citywide programs to provide secure access to food for every St. Louis resident. A patchwork of mutual aid and volunteer programs has been doing what would be more effectively done by the city. We have shown that the community can band together and help thousands of citizens get access to food, but our reach is limited. Our organization alone has hundreds of people on a wait list, most of whom we will unfortunately never have the capacity to help. The city could meet this massive need easily if it allocated even a portion of the funds from the police department to ensuring that its residents can access high quality food. This would be a far more effective use of those funds, as secure access to food is at the bedrock of a safe, sustainable, and thriving community. Once again, thank you for your time and for the opportunity to testify in favor of defunding the police department and funding the necessities like food that form the bedrock of community safety.
Thank you, Jamie. Next up is Chris Wilcox.
Good morning, Clerk Green, Mayor Jones, Comptroller Green, President Reed. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your commitment to close the workhouse. My name is Chris Wilcox, pronouns he, him, and I'm an organizer with St. Louis Mutual Aid. We are a network of organizers, healers, artists, community leaders, and everyday people coming together to deliver food and supplies, provide financial solidarity, offer emotional support, and connect people to their neighbors. Much like our friends who have already shared their views today, I would like to speak in favor of replacing funding for vacant positions for the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, SWAT, surveillance programs such as the Real-Time Crime Center, and the $19.8 million taken from the local use tax for the purpose of policing. Instead, we should reinvest these funds in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and social services. The outsized spending St. Louis devotes to the police and surveillance does little to reduce crime in St. Louis. Every year we pour more money into policing, and every year we get the same result. All of St. Louis has the highest police killings per capita in the country. Over the last year, I've worked together with our neighbors to stave off eviction and hunger as COVID ravaged our communities. I've heard from dozens of our neighbors struggling to make rent or their mortgage, along my comrades at Mutual Aid, who have each heard from dozens more. Our unhoused neighbors continue to endure harassment and need the security of the safe homes they deserve. Since March 15th, there have been 6,720 eviction filings, according to the Eviction Lab, with many more at the ready if eviction moratoriums lapse. We are on the precipice of an impending housing disaster. It is entirely preventable if we divert funding currently bound for policing and surveillance that has failed to yield the promised reduction in crime and instead reinvested in meeting our community's needs directly. We can create safety by providing homes and health and dealing with social problems with cooperative solutions. For this reason, I ask that we cut vacant police positions, SWAT, the Real-Time Crime Center, and the police's share of the use tax, and reinvest it instead in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and social programs to ensure safety and security for everyone. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope we can work together to make St. Louis a place where we look out for each other as neighbors.
Thank you, Chris. Next up is Joe Durso.
Good morning, Mayor Jones, Comptroller Green, and President Reed. My name is Joe Durso, St. Louis-based Research Associate for Youth Advocate Programs. YAP is a national nonprofit in 150 communities in 30 states and the District of Columbia. St. Louis is not yet one. Hopefully that will change. For more than 40 years, YAP has provided family-based alternatives to youth incarceration. We serve young people and adults whose histories include serious offenses, multiple arrests, and lengthy out-of-home placements. Independent research and our own data find YAP's youth programs dramatically reduce recidivism while keeping people safely home in their communities. YAP applauds Mayor Jones's move on day one to close the workhouse and begin to overhaul power structures perpetuating systematic inequities. YAP promotes divesting in facilities and investing in communities to create continuums of care capable of providing what each person needs to achieve well-being. The evidence is clear that a reduced reliance on incarceration need not equate to an increased risk to public safety. By hiring individuals who live in the neighborhoods we serve, YAP also brings jobs to cities and saves taxpayers money. YAP is included as an OJJDP model program and identified as a promising practice by the Office of Justice Programs. We're a gold medal program in positive youth justice, and we've been COA accredited since 2007. YAP's trauma-informed approach and strong outcomes have increasingly led cities, including Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Chicago, to partner with us to implement neighborhood-based violence interruption programs, credible messenger programs, and other adult reentry services. Just this month, Dallas and Charlotte announced new partnerships with YAP as well. Cities across the country too often lack the budget, the backbone, or both to implement a true continuum of care. In St. Louis, it's a new day, and for that, I thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next up, Mike Ziegler.
Good morning, Mayor Jones, Comptroller Green, and President Reed. My name is Mike Ziegler, and I'm from DeSales Community Development. We're a nonprofit that develops and manages affordable housing here in St. Louis City. Thank you for the chance to speak today. I'm offering a comment to express deep concern over plans to reduce funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I share this comment as a social worker at DeSales and coordinator of our eviction prevention program. This program is a vital lifeline for our residents and one that is largely dependent on funding from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This proposed cut would be a huge step back for the city's efforts to address homelessness and housing insecurity at a time when we can least afford it. When the eviction moratorium is lifted, many city residents, especially those who are unable to connect to rental assistance, will emerge from an already devastating pandemic to find themselves on the brink of homelessness and the ensuing compounding traumas that follow. This is a moment where Affordable Housing Trust Fund programs will be absolutely essential. Program like DeSales Eviction Prevention Program, which thanks to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has helped dozens of families avoid eviction by offering supportive services, financial coaching, and time to get caught up on rent. When I heard this budget was proposed to be cut, I reached out to past program participants to see if they had interest in offering a testimonial of why the Affordable Housing Trust Fund should not be cut. One participant, a single mother of 4 who is at risk of eviction, shared, "This program has helped me in so many ways, especially with helping me manage my rent, learn how to budget, how to set goals, and how to stay on track. This program has been such a big help with resources. This program should continue to be funded for people who are in a situation like mine, where they're behind on rent and facing eviction." Positive stories such as these can surely be found in every Affordable Housing Trust Fund program, underline a fundamental role that this funding plays in upholding the stability and well-being of our community. Using American Relief Act funding to patch this budget cut is a non-sustainable solution that leads to a lack of predictable funding for affordable housing agencies. Whereas fully funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would signal to the community the new mayoral administration's commitment to affordable housing in St. Louis with the belief that housing is healthcare. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up was Shauna Brenson, but I don't believe we see her in the, I don't believe we see her. Or Jonathan Hunt. Okay, moving on. Next up, Elaine Powers.
Thank you. So my name is Elaine Powers, and I serve as Executive Director of Rebuilding Together. We're a local nonprofit agency, and we focus on providing free home repair services to low-income homeowners, especially older adults, veterans, and individuals with disabilities. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity to offer my comments today in regard to the proposed funding cut to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Annually, through funding from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we're able to provide critical home repairs for 20 to 25 city homeowners who are living in unsafe and unhealthy homes. These homeowners want to stay in their homes, but challenges such as leaking roofs, broken windows, broken plumbing, HVAC systems, electrical issues often make their homes unsafe. Our agency also addresses issues such as lack of accessibility inside and outside of the home. When we're able to fix these challenges, we not only help to restore hope to older city residents, but we also help to prevent falls and prevent hospital visits. We help to prevent additional vacancies, and we help to prevent homelessness. We also help neighborhoods to retain the homeowners who have dedicated many years of their lives into their communities in the city. It is my understanding that the proposed budget plans to cut funding to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund by approximately $1.5 million for the next fiscal year to only $5 million. This proposed reduction is disproportionate, as the use tax is expected to increase by 23%, while the AHTF is being funded at its minimum allocation amount. The work done by Rebuilding Together and our nonprofit peers, many of whom you have also heard from today, to provide affordable and safe housing in the city should remain among our highest priorities. Every day we get calls from city homeowners seeking assistance with critical home repairs. And this funding is also critical to helping older adults to continue living in their homes. So again, I urge you to maintain funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at $6.5 million in local unrestricted funds, and then look to further increase the investment in affordable housing, including home repairs with your federal resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Next up is Kalia Powers. I'm sorry, not Kalia Edwards. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you. Hello, my name is Kalia Edwards. I use she, her pronouns. Born and raised in St. Louis, and as a victim of violent crime, I am demanding the board give no money to SLMPD and instead reinvest that money into communities to address the root causes of crime while also creating conditions to promote healthy, strong communities. And that is by funding an abundance of resources that folks came here today to talk about, and essentially making police obsolete. I have watched SLMPD officers beat my family members outside our home in South City. They would follow and harass me and my siblings and other children in our community, waiting for us at bus stops just to harass us. That has been my reality my entire life. Sorry, this is kind of hard to talk about. But yeah, this is the reality that we are living in, and I am tired of this being it. I've watched them target and harass unhoused folks for being poor, and it is clear now more than ever that the police do not protect us, and actually them in our communities surveilling our residents is one of the main reasons why we are not safe. So many folks came on here today and thank the mayor and thank the administration and this administration for closing the workhouse. And while I'm also incredibly happy that this is happening, I also know that we need to dismantle the power and reach of the prison industrial complex and these larger systems of white supremacy that aid, demand, and uphold it. So I've said it once and I'll say it again, as long as the police exist, they will continue to kill poor Black and brown people, poor Black and brown Indigenous folks. And so this city funding the police is this city funding our abusers. Police serve a violent, anti-Black and colonial purpose, and we don't want them in our communities and we need them out. Again, this is for our safety. And so again, as I've stated, I would demand this city give zero money to the police. Giving them money is funding our state-sanctioned murdered. And just want to close out by saying, think of all the good we could do for our people if we took these tens of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars and invest them directly into the community. And as someone who works directly with unhoused folks, I know that we need a 24-hour shelter. We need safe havens. And even just as I was speaking just now, we get so much snow and we don't have anyone plowing our streets, or y'all only plow the main streets. And it's like, y'all are continuing to give money to the police and not putting things that actually make us safe. And it's simple as like plowing our streets. So I'm gonna wrap it up.
Thank you, Kalia. Next up is Trayvon Latimer.
Thank you, Mayor Jones, Comptroller Green, and President Reed for providing space for us to voice our thoughts and concerns about the proposed FY22 budget. My name is Trayvon. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a city resident residing in Ward 6. I'm also the Senior Justice for All Policy Advocacy Fellow at 402 Ferguson. Like many others who have already spoken, I am concerned about the proposed $270 million of the general fund going to public safety versus the proposed $3.4 million of the general fund going to health and human services. For far too long, we have invested too much money into systems that arrest, incarcerate, and enact state violence in communities suffering from decades-long economic disinvestment. We are requesting that the city defunds money allocated to our police department vacant positions, police overtime pay, SWAT, real-time crime center, and shot spotters, and reinvest those funds into proven public safety alternatives that will target the root causes of crime to measurably decrease violence in the city and cultivate the healing ecosystem needed for a racially equitable St. Louis. 402 Ferguson exists because of the killing of Michael Brown Jr. at the hands of police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. The Ferguson Commission report that was birthed from that incident proposed many police reform measures. While the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department has enacted some changes adjacent to these recommendations, they would not be enough to fundamentally change our public safety system. What is most striking about the outcomes of the commission's process is that when asked to address the root causes of this police killing, the community leaders returned a document that included policy priorities ranging from fair housing and equitable education to accessible transportation and living wage. As Jay and others previously touched on, there are tangible and practical yet radically imaginative ways we can use reallocated funds that will grow the seeds of the public safety system we desire. We can invest in a first responder alternative program that is independent of the police department. There are countless stories across the nation and in St. Louis where a police officer responded to a call involving someone experiencing mental illness or homelessness, only for the incident to end in the harming or death of that individual at the hands of police, who are overall unequipped to respond to many community needs. Investing in crisis workers, specially trained to independently respond to nonviolent crisis, can allow those in crisis to receive the help and care they truly need. We can also invest in the Ferguson Commission call to create community justice centers that could cultivate new sentencing alternatives and connections to well-being with services that address root causes of crime, such as a sobering center, robust job training programs, housing resources, and a 911 diversion call training. The Defund, Revision, Transform Coalition, which Forth Ferguson is a member of, also names important measures that could begin to reckon with and heal past harm to residents, such as reparations for families whose loved ones have been killed by police, who are burdened with bereavement and funeral costs without access to victim compensation funds because their loved ones are considered criminals without proper investigations. Police reform and police accountability, or police reform and police community relations, are not enough to ensure safe communities and racial equity. And it requires investments in long-term solutions that will radically and fundamentally change our public safety system. Now is the time for us as a city to be a national leader in investing in the well-being of our most impacted communities and creating more thriving cities for us all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Trayvon. Next up, Blake Hamilton.
Good morning, Mayor Jones, Comptroller Green, President Reed, and fellow St. Louisans who took the time to be here today. My name is Blake Hamilton. My pronouns are he, him, and I am Senior Vice President of Programs at the International Institute and a resident of the 16th Ward. I also volunteer as chair of the Immigrant Service Provider Network's Language Access Committee. And for the uninitiated, the Immigrant Service Provider Network is a coalition of more than 40 organizations serving immigrants in the city of St. Louis. I'm here today on behalf of ISPN to advocate for meaningful investment in language access across city services. The city has an obligation to serve all residents under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And without meaningful investment in language access, the city effectively renders fluency in English a prerequisite for accessing public services. Foreign-born St. Louisans comprise approximately 7% of the city population and 10% of our workforce, and yet 0% of the proposed budget is devoted to necessary supports for residents with limited English proficiency. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provides that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be otherwise subjected to discrimination under any program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. Further, Executive Order 13166 directs agencies to examine the services it provides and develop and implement a system by which LEP persons, limited English proficiency persons, can meaningfully access those services. The Immigrant Service Provider Network requests that the Board of Estimate and Apportionment allocate appropriate funding in FY 2022 budget to help ensure St. Louis City's compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Specifically, ISPN requests funds be allocated for the purpose of facilitating written and spoken language access to city services and creating an environment that welcomes immigrants and refugees to this city. We believe these funds should be allocated as follows. 1, allocate funding for the purpose of contracting with interpretation and translation providers and developing a streamlined internal system for each city department to utilize this centrally contracted language service to support the accessibility of city services for St. Louisans with limited English proficiency. For the translation of critical government documents in the languages most commonly spoken by city residents. For over-the-phone video and face-to-face interpretation services used by city employees during the provision of service to city residents with limited English proficiency. And for training city employees in the use of contracted language services. 2, allocate funding for the establishment of data collection, processing, and reporting on departmental use of language services in order to monitor the use of such services by department, as well as track language needs of residents accessing city services by department. And finally, to create a welcoming strategy for the city, which would include funding a city office for new Americans, developing procedures for translation and interpretation for all city services and web materials, convening an immigrant and refugee advisory group for the city, and providing practical cultural competency training for city employees and volunteers, among other items. A core value of St. Louis is that no matter where you're from, you belong here. Increased support for language access services not only makes it possible for city residents to access life-saving information and vital documents for their daily lives, it also sends a strong message that no matter where you're from, you belong in St. Louis. The city of St. Louis has made strides in language access during the COVID-19 pandemic to reach its foreign-born residents with critical information. Allocating funding for language access will build on this momentum by ensuring St. Louisans with limited English have true access to city services, including health and human services, emergency services, employment services, recreation services, and more. Language access helps make our residents healthier, more connected to government, and more able to fully participate civically, socially, and economically. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Blake. Next up, I believe, is Emily Anderson is not here. So next is Jennifer Lovett.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Good morning, Clerk Green, Board of Estimates and Apportionment. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I can barely hear her.
Yes, Jennifer, can you speak up a little bit for us, please?
Is that better? Is that a little better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this public hearing. My name is Jennifer Lovett. I'm a lifelong St. Louisan. I have a history of family mental illness. I believe that we should be looking at best practices from around the country and around the world regarding policing and mental health services. Instead of spending money on reactionary policing, which can bring great harm to our community, we should be investing our dollars in non-armed first responders who are trained to independently respond to 911 calls. It doesn't make much sense to me to allocate 36% of the general fund on policing and only 0.2% on health and human services. I would much rather have someone from the community trained in de-escalating and helping folks having a mental health crisis show up for 911 call instead of the armed police. I have many friends who also have family members with mental illness, and one of their greatest fears is that somebody will call the police during one of the episodes of their family members. They're terrorized by the thought of having that happen to them. I would much rather see the money reallocated from police funds to health and human services and absolutely to safe and affordable housing, which many other people have referenced here today. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer. And last but certainly not least, Ed Giganti. Did I say that right? You're on mute.
I promised myself I was not going to do that, and then I did it anyway. My name is Ed Giganti, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm a resident of St. Louis, the 17th Ward, and I currently serve as chairman of the board of directors of Doorways, an interfaith nonprofit organization dedicated to providing housing and supportive services to improve quality of life and health outcomes for people affected by homelessness and HIV/AIDS. I speak to you today on behalf of our board, our staff, and the clients of Doorways to oppose the 23% reduction of funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the city's proposed fiscal 22 budget. I urge city leaders to reinstate the current levels of funding at $6.5 million and consider further increases via federal funding to help us address the ongoing impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is an essential source of support, ensuring that Doorways is able to fulfill its mission to serve residents impacted by homelessness and HIV/AIDS. Addressing the community's most at-risk residents, Doorways plays a pivotal role in providing services to a population that is 74% African American, 32% female, and 1/3 children. It is our belief that, first of all, housing is healthcare. We've heard that many times this morning. When Doorways provides housing and resources to St. Louisans impacted by homelessness and HIV/AIDS, we're preventing root causes of further health problems. Second, community housing needs are higher now than ever. For years, demand for housing services coupled with the rise of homelessness throughout the region led Doorways to expand its services to meet this growing need. At present, we are engaged in a bold expansion project, one we call Doorways 2.0, building a $30 million campus that will expand emergency housing, permanent housing, and a broad range of supportive services such as behavioral health and employment counseling. Our new home will be located on Jefferson Avenue in North St. Louis, just 2 blocks from the new NGA West campus site. Without the support of a fully funded affordable housing trust fund, this vision could not have become a reality. Finally, affordable housing cuts are disproportionate. Without a fully funded affordable housing trust fund, we can expect African Americans to be disproportionately impacted by these actions, in particular those who are homeless and living with HIV and AIDS. Affordable housing is vital now and will remain important as St. Louis recovers from COVID-19. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a flexible and necessary source of funding for doorways that allows us to respond quickly to community housing needs, provide emergency services, and establish a sustainable housing solution. So in closing, I strongly urge you to maintain the current level of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at $6.5 million and consider further increases via federal funding. A $1.5 million cut in housing services at this time is simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, we have gotten through the entire list of people who signed up to testify today. Thank you everyone for your time and thank you for your comments. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn today's public hearing of estimate and apportionment.
I will move to adjourn, but before I do it, I just also want to thank everyone for coming today. Every year, we are getting more and more participations in these meetings, and this is the biggest yet. And I tell you, having been here when we would have one person or 2 people, or oftentimes like no one show up, it's a breath of fresh air to see so many people show up and give us their thoughts and concerns. So I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up. And with that, I move for adjournment of this session of the Board of E&A.
I think Stephanie has a...
Last year, we had several written comments and there was a motion to add those to the record. And so
Okay.
I'm willing to do that. I think we have 26 on record right now, and I probably got a few more. So if we just say, you know, that we open those.
Yeah.
And
Okay, I withdraw my original motion. I move that we add all of the written comments to the permanent record.
There a second? Comptroller, you are on mute.
Thank you. I was muted. I wanted to thank Stephanie for acknowledging those that sent in comments, but I'd also like to ask her to give you the number. This is a substantially increased number of written comments over a year ago. And I think we had over 40 actual people present to speak, but I believe we have just as many who sent in written comments. Stephanie, can you speak to that?
Yes, I have 27 written comments, and there are some people that did send in attachments and things like that, but I asked them to send in their commentary as well. So we should have roughly 37 additional comments to add to the record. And I also want to add those ones of people that may have been on earlier and weren't able to stay on because they did send theirs. So I'll reach out to them as well. So with those 37 and the 4 that were missing, we'll have at least up to 41.
And then, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor and Mr. President, I'll just want to give the names of a few of them. Some of them actually sent not only written comments, but they also sent additional notes to the mayor and myself, and in addition to the president of the board. For example, Christy Griffin, she sent in a written comment. We have a Gloria Boyer who sent in a written comment. We have Joshua Lawrence who sent in a written comment. Darian Robinson, Sean Ballard, Teresa Denially, Jerry Paul or Peel, Jake Villarreal, Erica Bowler, Bonnie Reese, and there are many, many more. But I just want to say that we do have a great community participation that has been growing and growing, and I wanted to allow the names to be heard that bothered to put time into writing us on behalf of what they believe our city should be looking like as we go into reviewing the comments and how we're going to honor their participation for this year's budget.
Yes, thank you, Madam Comptroller, for adding those names to the record. Has it been moved and properly seconded that I think we have a motion, but not a second.
Yes, we need a second.
We need a second.
I'll second with a comment. I would have liked for us to discuss what we intend to do, but I know that's not possible, especially with the Zoom. But I do intend, after hearing comments, to definitely move to recommend to the other members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment to look at some substantial reductions when it comes to police positions that have gone vacant for several years. That's something that I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend that we look at a $1.5 million increase to Affordable Housing Trust. I think that we might be able to make that a permanent mandate after discussion. Right now, the mandate is 5. It could go up, especially during this recovery period. I think that in addition, home repair grants could be looked at, and increasing 911 funding, increasing health and human services funding. So those are just my thoughts that I will go into further discussions with the other members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. But I wanted to make it clear at this meeting, because I believe we only have one more meeting before we're actually going to move this budget over to the Board of Aldermen. But I think that the Board of Estimate and Apportionment can make some critical adjustments prior, after hearing from our community, to move forward towards what we need in the budget.
Yes, Madam Comptroller, would it be possible, I know that the $1.5 million increase on the last fiscal year came from CARES Act funding. Paul, please weigh in if possible. Would it be possible to increase Affordable Housing Trust Fund funds from American Recovery Act funds for the next several years?
Oh, absolutely. As a consideration for what you're talking about in the grant funds that are coming down the pipeline, yes, that would be a possibility.
And also home repair grants. I think that that's also something that could be considered with American Recovery Act funds.
Yes.
And on the 911 increase, Comptroller Green, could you explain exactly what you were looking for there?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you had definitely put forth your voice regarding the 911 situation and possibly partnering with the county, as in fact, I believe there was some work done towards increasing the number of positions that had been removed from 911 citywide. So we need to make sure that the 911 positions that had been funded previously, we can move to put people in place to actually answer the phones so that we can increase the amount of favorable outcomes with regard to folks answering those 911 calls as we, move towards some other collaborations. But I think in this budget, we want to make sure that we're tightening up that kind of opportunity to increase the number of positions there.
Well, also just wanted to add there that we submitted, I'm sorry, my office is facing the fire department. So you let them move. We submitted a request to Congresswoman Bush's office for the earmarks to fund the public safety access point which is combining all of our dispatchers into one place. So we submitted that as a request to Congresswoman Bush. Hopefully we'll hear soon what the status of that request will be. And then that will standardize our response, increase the number of people who are available to answer 911 calls from, you know, the police department, the fire department, and EMS. But also, again, as I talked about a couple of days ago, we're looking at, you know, how do we also combine our efforts with St. Louis County, so if that we are overwhelmed, then our calls then bump to another place or get transferred to another place. So that is also under consideration. And Health and Human Services funding, anything in particular there?
Oh, absolutely. The mental health professionals, trauma-informed individuals that can respond. So it's all in line with what we're already talking about. But I think what's critical is to make clear that these kinds of adjustments can be made in this budget prior to it going to the Board of Aldermen, so that the administration in the executive branch can be clear as to what we're delivering in this year's budget, what our expectations are in this year's budget, and how we are intending to serve our public with additional services to help move the city forward. So we understand the call from the community to look at what we intend to do and how we intend to repurpose what we call in public service. And I may have been repeating something that you've been saying, Madam Mayor, during your campaign, but this is our time. This is the place. And so I don't want us to miss the moment to make clear that this is how we're going to do it. And additionally, I've mentioned reducing those police positions that have gone vacant for several years. That is something that can help inspire the increases that I'm speaking of, so that we can move this community throughout the communities throughout the city forward.
Agreed. I look forward to working with you on those amendments.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else, President Reed?
No, I think we covered it. I think we covered it.
Okay. All righty. Well, now I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait a minute. I made the motion for
And I
the.
seconded
Seconded.
comments. And the comments have been very long.
Yep. Now we just.
Right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All righty.
Thank you all.
Now I move to adjourn the session of the Board of E&A, one of the most productive community engagement sessions we've had of the Board of E&A, at least during my time here. So I move to adjourn this session.
Great. And is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned.
All right.
Have a
You all have a
wonderful
great
weekend.
day. All right. See y'all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.